AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right. This ain't just a show. This is a platform. Veteran built, battle tested. Welcome to the Misfit Nation. Yeah! Mic in the room, built from boots on the ground, now we breaking the rules. 2 vets, 1 leader, painting the sound, turn scars into sermons, let them echo around. Authors with truth, musicians with fire, actors backstage chasing something higher. Entrepreneurs bleeding just to get ahead. If you fought for your dream, yeah, you are what you said. If they told you no, if you still came back, if you fell to your knees but you stayed on track, this is your voice, this is your flame. Say it loud, remember the name. No salvation, just elevation. We rise again. From the fight to the end. We are the Misfit Nation. No damn labels, no damn cages. If you're still breathing, you belong. Turn it up. This is our song. Yeah. This is our song. Yeah. Veterans standing with ghosts in the chest. First responders running in while the world second guess. Gold star names carved deep in the soul. Your story ain't over, we carry the whole. Coaches teaching mindset, breaking the chain, turning barely alive into owning the pain. Truth over polish, scars on display. If it's real, let it bleed. That's the misstep play. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. If it's heavy right now, and the dark feels cold. It's Aubrey right now. We're the more than you know. Don't walk alone. Veterans press 1, bring it home. Don't trade forever for tonight. You're still needed in this fight. We are the Misfit Nation, built from scars and dedication. We rise again. From the fire, from the fight to the end. We are the Misfit Nation. Every voice is fabrication. From the silence to the scream, we're strong. Welcome home, you belong. You belong. You belong. Oh wait, you. Oh wait, you belong.
The boys are back. Misfit Nation, it may be cold outside, but in here, the fire is already burning. It's January, the grind is real. And this is where we warm up with purpose, grit, and straight up energy. No slow starts, no winter excuses, just momentum, motivation, and the crew bringing the heat when you need it most. So shake off the cold, turn it up, and get ready because this is the ToosDay Crüe, and Steven and Jake are coming in hot. Let's go, boys!
You gotta slam the brakes there. Whoa, coming in.
Yeah.
What up,
Good
what up,
evening,
what up?
everybody. And good evening, Stephen. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I am great. Great. Woke up on the right side of the grass this morning, and so life is great.
That's always good to hear.
Yes, it is. Anything interesting happened since Thursday?
No, not a damn thing. Nothing interesting. A little snow over the weekend. Expecting a lot of snow this weekend, but like I said, we'll wait and see. Wait and see game.
Well, let's just hope that the snow's not too bad and we don't get people trapped in their houses and all that neat stuff.
You know, if they are, it's going to be for an hour or two. ShopRite shelves will be empty because all the bread and water has to be gone. And, you know, normal things.
Around here, an hour or two usually ends up being about a week. So, but hey, you know, Mrs. Holland and the YJ will get us out of here. Got a great show tonight,
for God's country.
Hey, I want to tell everybody out there, if you're listening, pipe up in the chat tonight so we can tell you hi, and because we love to hear from our listeners. And tonight, I'm expecting a lot of questions because I think it's going to be a great show. I think it's probably the first time we've ever had a show like this one.
Yeah, and maybe we can persuade some of these people that throw in questions to come over to YouTube, hang out. We're in the chat there. I'm in the chat there 3 days a week. Come in, say hey, hang out.
Come in and say hey on YouTube. But let me tell you about this guest we got tonight.
You got it.
We're honored to welcome Chris Bingham, and he is going to share the incredible story of K9 Tambo. K9 Tambo is a retired federal police working dog whose service didn't end when the uniform came off. After years of protecting people and property at the highest levels, he now faces the fight of his life against a very aggressive cancer. This is a story about loyalty, sacrifice, faith, and the unbreakable bond between a handler and his canine partner. So without any further ado, let's get Chris Bingham in here.
Chris, welcome. How are you,
welcome, Chris?
How you doing?
Doing great. I gave about the 5-cent version of your bio. If you could fill our guests in and our listeners on the other 95 cents of it, we really enjoy that.
Sure. So I've been in law enforcement now for going on year 24. K9's been my passion. So 17 of those years have been spent working dogs and leading K9 teams. I was able to retire 3 dogs. First dog was Rex. He was a dual purpose Malinois. Second dog was Tina, Malinois Shepherd mix. And then obviously we'll talk about Tambo today, but Tambo was my last dog that I retired, who is a German Shepherd. Since then I've moved on to some leadership roles. I just graduated Northwestern's Police Staff and Command School. That's a 10-week school that I was invited to. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell, gentlemen.
Now, you retired 3 dogs. You kept 1. How hard was it with the other 2 when you retired them?
It's tough. My first one, he really struggled. He had bad separation anxiety, so his whole life, was coming to work with me. So when I left him at home, he couldn't handle it. So he got a little, destructive. He was too smart for his own goods because he was actually ended up leaving the house a couple of times and didn't go far, but we got calls from the neighbors saying he was in their yard. And so that one was a little bit of an adjustment to, I ended up, long story short, I ended up taking him to believe it or not, he was older than a doggy daycare, and he did well there. And they had a special room for him where they watched him when I went to work. But it took him a while to really adjust, being home on his own, because these dogs come to work with you. They're with you 24/7. And then when that ends, they don't understand why it's stopping, even though their bodies are starting to slow down. Their minds are still in that work mode. So that never leaves them.
I've often wondered about that because I know even with just my dumb pet dog I have at the house, uh, I have to crate him because whenever I leave or whenever me and my wife leave, he's a big counter surfer, and he will totally wreck a kitchen. So I always wondered about working dogs and how they handled that, and I, you know, it's pretty obvious that it's pretty much the same across all of them.
Yeah, and the big thing with my first dog Rex is, I had taken on a second dog, Tina, so I would take Tina to work, and then he he lost his shit when he would see me leaving with Tina every day, now with another dog. and
Because
and
you're
he
cheating on them.
yeah. And he couldn't stand it. And it was funny, their interactions is they kind of had a mutual respect for each other. They could lay down, basically butt to butt, but they would not interact with each other unless they thought any type of threat was coming to the house. Then they kind of team up in that pack mentality. But they just kind of had a mutual respect. But they didn't do a lot of interacting, with each other. But all my dogs, when they retired, they had a big adjustment with going from being active every day, and then just kind of lounging around the house. So you still, even when they retire, you still have an obligation to that dog to keep some stimulation in that dog. And because like I said, the mind is still going, even though their bodies are slowed down, whether that's taking them for a walk when you get home, or doing some other, activities with them, playing with their Kong in the yard, or taking them for a ride. They still need that stimulation. And I think you kind of owe it to them, in retirement, to continue to provide that care for them and stimulation once they retire.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a commitment when you now, like when you retire them. Do they give you the option to take them with you, or is that kind of mandatory? That you're going to take your dog with you.
I mean, 95% of the canine handlers are going to tell you, when you have that option to, retire the dog, it's one of the best days in your life. Also, one of the saddest. The best day is you now know that dog belongs to you. It's your dog. Where before, when that dog is working, you can't take that dog on vacations, or you're limited to some of the things you can do with that dog. So now, that dog belongs to you. The sad part comes in is that working career is over. All those memories and times you shared, those silent drives to work, the training, all that comes to an end. And what a lot of people don't know is also, when these dogs retire, that burden of cost and liability now falls on the handler. And it gets pretty pricey, with the care of these dogs in retirement, because I've always referenced them to, like, NFL athletes, right? Is they have these prime athletes, and a lot of wear and tear on the body. And then when that's over, that's when the body really starts to break down, and they need that care. And that's not a fault of any of the departments. There's just nothing set up for these dogs in retirement, military, really, or police. And that's where a lot of these programs like Tambo's in now, like Project K9 Hero, that come in and provide medical care for these dogs in retirement, which is a huge financial lift for a lot of handlers that can get them in these programs.
Yeah, I understand. And this is a lot better option than when they retire and they put them down. That this is, because that's very sad to do. But yeah, I like this option a lot better.
I've always said that I don't think a handler should ever have to make a decision on their dog health wise, for dogs that have served our communities and countries, based on finances.
Hmm.
And, you know, just with Tambo's health stuff alone with Project K9 here, I was talking to the founder, a couple weeks ago, and they've now funded probably over 30,000 in his care. But, a lot of handlers may be younger and their dogs retire younger and may not have those finances to provide that. And sometimes have to make difficult decisions based on that, which is really tough. And that's why, these programs that come in. I know my first two dogs, Rex and Tina, when they retired, these programs weren't around, and both of them in retirement got cancer within a year of each other, and both passed away. And I remember, draining my bank accounts, on chemo and treatments, trying to save them, but and they both of them didn't make it, but it was a huge financial burden, but I felt like I owed it to them to give that to them. So there wasn't, I would never put a dollar amount on the price of their life after they were so loyal and served me, for so many years.
Yeah. Now that seems like kind of a high rate of cancer. Is that from exposure, or do they know?
You really don't know. I mean, unfortunately, as Rex, when he went, he was 14 years old. He had a great life, and he ran the beaches in retirement and loved to swim and really had a long life. Tina, unfortunately, she was only 9 years old, and sometimes it's just like in humans, right? We just don't know why
Hmm.
cancer strikes. And unfortunately there is a high rate in a lot of dogs, but I really can't pinpoint something why it happens, or what the rhyme and reason are of why some dogs get cancer. I've seen some working dogs get cancer at 3 years old, right? And it's just kind of like, again, us as humans, there's children that get cancer and young adults, and then sometimes it doesn't. My dad just got diagnosed with lymphoma at 78. So I think it just comes at different times, and that's the hard part of life sometimes.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Oh,
I was wondering if it was the vehicles being in, the fumes, the chemicals, the drugs, or bombs, or that got them sick. I was just wondering about that.
I don't think so off the cuff. I mean, there hasn't been any definitive research out there, for that. But yeah, again, it's hard to say, again, rhyme or reason
right.
why anything like that does happen. But it's unfortunate either way.
Well, it's pretty much like adults too. When I was growing up, 9 years old, I was working in the meat market doing deliveries in Jersey City, and a few years later, the man that owned the business retired. He was 88 years old. He was used to getting up every day, going to Jersey City, opening up the meat market, working. Within 2 years, he was dead. He stopped
Yeah,
doing what doing every damn day. His body
and and
shut down, and it was over.
and that's why with the working dogs, as I was kind of saying a few minutes ago, it's so important to provide that care and give these dogs, some activity, because it's just like, you hit the nail on the head. You hear about people having this long career, cops, firefighters, other military, and then they get out, and all that kind of stops, that hustle and bustle, and then you hear about a year later, 2 years later, they pass away from a heart attack or stroke, or another reason. And I think there's a lot to be said with staying active, and keeping the mind stimulated. And I think that's part of the reason, like with Tambo, is my positivity, and what I provide for him is what's helped keep him going, and kind of defy the odds of probability of why he's still here.
Right.
Cool. We're gonna. Oh, we do have a question.
All right. Rex, in effect, wants to know how had Ted's in Afghanistan as part of the surge? They were giving quick training to them, turn over to us. Have you seen dogs get quick training and be successful, especially explosive death?
When it comes to detection work, it doesn't take dogs long to pick up an odor, right? When you're imprinting those dogs on odor, it's once that dog has that scent down, they don't forget it. Now, I will say this, anytime you can get more repetition with that dog and more training, that dog's going to be more proficient in what they do. It's just kind of like anything with us when we're training. The more they talk about boxers and stuff, right, where they get proficient on those jabs or those strikes or hitting that bag 1,000 times, right? It's just there's nothing sexy about it, but it's the repetition. And it's the same with dogs. But you can get them trained quickly. All it takes is one time to really kind of imprint that dog, and they kind of have that odor down. But I know, we like to make sure our dogs are proficient in those areas and get as much repetition as possible for we ever make dogs operational in that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely want them operating at the top of their game.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
quick few seconds for a man. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I was reading through some stuff and looking at your and Tambo's journey and everything. I guess you're going to be featured in a story in the Dogist.
So we were recently that over the summer. If people aren't familiar with the Dogist, Elias, he's got probably about 11 million followers on social media. He's known for going around taking. He got famous taking the pictures of the different dogs and celebrity dogs and stuff like that. So his team had reached out to me. They had heard about Tambo's story. So they invited us to be a part of his new YouTube Substack series, which we did an interview over the summer. And I kind of shared Tambo's story, which, with Elias, and we kind of went over everything in his journey. And, you can find that on YouTube under his subscriptions.
Okay. All
right. I'll have to look that up and watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I followed Tambo's Instagram account a while ago just to look at all your pictures and stuff. Dude, how do you subject the dog to putting costumes on a dog? Come on, man.
Hey, he's been a good sport, and and what I tried to do, guys, is like when we started going through the chemotherapy sessions and stuff, I didn't want it. I wanted to document the journey, and I wanted to show kind of what these working dogs go through in retirement, and the need to have care for them when they retire, and that once the kind of the badge comes off them when they retire, their journey doesn't end. So it was key for me. I wanted to document that and peel back the curtain a little bit. But what I also didn't want to do is make everything so sad, right? So what we tried to do is, we had 5 intravenous chemo sessions, and they were spaced out over every 2 weeks. So I started coming up with some different themes and stuff. So we did I actually have the shirt on right now, but we did a John Cena theme where I put a John Cena t-shirt on him, and I wore this one, and I had Tambo come out to Cena's music, and then we did you might have saw we did a Rocky theme where I put a boxing outfit on him, and he came out, and people really enjoyed it, and what it did is it in a dark time and a sad time, it brought some light to it, right? And that's what we have to have when we go through these hard things in life, is we have to sometimes find some humor, find some light in these dark times, and it gives people hope. And what it started doing is just to kind of brighten people's day a little bit, what happened is a lot of people with either with cancer or had, family member affected with cancer, started reaching out to me and telling me how much, they were inspired, or, they gave, Tambo gave them a laugh, or, a dad that, has his daughter, has cancer, and she's not doing well, but she sees Tambo's post and it gave her a smile in a dark time. And, and that was deep for me. And, so we really, this kind of turned into, something much bigger. His Instagram really started to grow by the thousands. And, so, if we can, if I can document that journey of what the dogs go through and the need for care, but also give some hope to some people, and, provide some humor to them in some dark times, I'm all for it. But it's really kind of heavy just hearing, some of the stories of what, people are going through. And I think that, any of us that go through cancer, we can learn, or any kind of struggle in life, we can learn a lot from dogs, right? Because, Tambo's an 11-year-old retired dog. He's got an aggressive terminal cancer. He's got arthritis, but he gets up every day. He chooses life. He chooses happiness. And I think sometimes as humans, we tend to complicate our own lives, right? We get caught up in the little things. And, he doesn't know he has cancer. He's happy just to get up and have his breakfast and go for a ride with me, right? And and when we look at the simple things in life, and we have hope, and we don't get caught up of what comes tomorrow, it helps us focus more on today, and finding, being more present with our family and having that time, which is so important.
Yeah, and that is very important. Now, question about that. You uh, you're not an active handler anymore, correct?
No, after Tambo retired, that was my third dog. I was running the unit. I ran the unit for 7 years. I had 17 years in. And Tambo and I had such a special bond, as I kind of wanted to ended on that note. I had some good people coming up underneath me that I felt, would make, fill into my position as a leader seamlessly. And, it was good timing because my son was being born, as my first child. And it was a good segue for me to go out and, acclimate Tambo to retired life. So, he initially retired, and he was doing great, and he got along with my son great. He kind of found a second life, and guarding my son, and being attached to my son, because I think he saw my son as an extension of me. But then he was out in the yard one day chasing a squirrel, and he leaped off the steps, and he tore, not only one ACL, but he tore both, which was more of a CCL in dogs. But he a double tear. And I remember he could barely walk, and I got him into the orthopedic, and they're like, look, one leg is going to be 7,000 a piece, so we were looking at about 14,000. And that's when Project K9 here first came into the picture. I'd met the founder, Jason, probably about a year and a half earlier at a conference, and we had stayed in contact, and he had helped another dog on our unit. So I called him up, and he got Tambo in the program, and they funded the first surgery right away for 7,000. And Tambo made a full recovery quicker than most dogs. And he was doing so good that his leg was stable enough where they didn't have to do the surgery on the other leg. And kind of brought his mobility back. And I was so appreciative of that. And I'm somebody that likes to give back. That we kind of came an ambassador for Project K9 Hero, which was great for Tambo because it kind of gave him another job in retirement. So we were doing a
Yeah.
lot of events. We did, Seattle Mariners. We did the Clemson Tigers football. We got honored by the Baltimore Orioles, and then on Tambo's 11th birthday, we got honored by the Philadelphia Phillies for their salute to service game, and that was pretty cool because my son was there, and they had Tambo on the big screen, and they wished him a happy birthday. So you know,
Nice.
life was good. I mean, I was, enjoying my son. Tambo was thriving in retirement, and then, kind of July came, and it was a random day. I ended up leaving work early. I wasn't feeling well. Something told me I needed to leave work early that day, and which I never do. And I came home, and Tambo usually greets me at the door. Wasn't there. I found him in the dining room. He was sprawled out. He had vomited. His gums were pale, which was indicative of blood loss. And then, so I rushed him over to the vet. And I remember them coming out saying, "Look, your dog's bleeding out. He had a mass rupture on his spleen. We're pretty sure that it's cancer. Um, you can elect to try to do surgery and remove the spleen and give him a blood transfusion, but we don't think he's going to make it." And I talk about this in all my other interviews. Is I go back and I'm looking at him, and our eyes kind of lock, and he's and as a handler to my dog, which we're so bonded with, he's basically telling me he's not ready to die. Um,
Yeah.
for the first time I saw fear in his eyes too, but he's basically saying, "Dad, I'm not ready." And I told him, I said, "How much is the surgery?" And they said it's going to be anywhere from $9,000 to $12,000. So luckily he was with Project K9 here. It was a quick phone call to them, and the founder Jason said, "Whatever you want to do, Chris, it's your decision. We got Tambo's back 100%." And I got off the phone and said, "Let's do the surgery." And I said my goodbyes to him just in the event that he didn't make it, and then I had to leave, and so they could get him back for the surgery. Then they called me again like an hour later, and we're like, "Look, we got him opened up, and his mass, I mean his spleen is absolutely covered in masses. And are you sure you want to go through with this surgery?" And I didn't hesitate. I said, "Yep." I said, "Absolutely." And they're like, "Okay, but just know that he may not make it." And I know my dog, and I want to go through with it. And we did. He made it through surgery. He recovered quicker than probably most dogs have. That, and that's Tambo. And then I
Mm-hmm.
remember after his recovery, they're telling me, "Okay, given this cancer, he has 2 weeks to live." And but you can get an appointment with oncology and see if there's anything more you can do. And oh, by the way, we think the cancer's spread to the liver. So I did my research, and I found a good oncologist in Pennsylvania, and made the appointment. Tambo and I drove out there, and she's sitting down with me prior, saying, "Look, if this cancer is on the liver, we're going to take him back and do an ultrasound. Chemotherapy isn't really going to do anything, and you may have to make a tough decision today, because if one of these blood masses form again on the liver and rupture, you're looking at another emergency situation, and this cancer is also really aggressive." So she took him back, and came back, and by the grace of God, she said what they thought was cancer on the liver wasn't, and that he was a candidate for chemotherapy. So we started it that day, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's when we started the 5 sessions. And it's funny, each time I went in for a session, she would try to give me another timeline of how much time he had to live, and it got to the point where she stopped, because I would just say, "Look," I said, "no disrespect," I said, we don't believe in expiration dates. I believe in that the mind, body, and spirit is what keeps people going. And I don't want to hear any dates. So, and he made it through the sessions like a champ. He had his days of nausea, where he didn't want to eat, but he got up. He was still enthusiastic. We got honored by the Orioles again, even while he was going through chemotherapy, as kind of a final salute to him, since they're kind of my hometown team. And again, my son got
Mm-hmm.
to come out for that. And once he finished the intravenous chemo, they put him on an oral chemo, which he's been on now for about 15 weeks. But this all started, guys, in July. So he was never supposed to make it. He was never supposed to make it out of July. And and here we are now in 2026, but kind of our full circle moment is that, through this whole chemotherapy stuff, I was really leaning into that Rocky mantra, right? Because my whole life I've kind of been the underdog, where I've had to scratch and claw, to get to where I was, and that those Rocky movies always resonated with me. And then, I saw the same in Tambo, and how Tambo and I kind of came together is when I came back as our commander. They weren't going to give me a dog, because they said, you're going to be too busy. We had a very high functioning unit, and I was going back and forth with my boss for a year. I didn't work a dog, and then finally she's like, okay, you want a dog, you got to take Tambo. And the story on Tambo, he was a dog that nobody wanted. He had gone through two handlers. They couldn't handle him. He was known as guarded, aloof, stubborn, sensitive. They were about to give up on him. So she's like, all right, this is your chance if you want a dog. So me being up for the challenge, I took it. And I talk about this moment a lot. And that first day I go up to the kennel, and I'm going in to get him out. And we had this stare down where we're both kind of looking at each other. And I was like, my God, I said, I'm freaking looking in a mirror. These are all the same labels that I've been given my whole life. And at that moment, guys, I was like, this is meant to be. This is something higher, bringing us together. And Tambo, my other dogs, the trust and the bond came so easy for me, because I've always been gifted with dogs, but Tambo, I really had to earn it. But it's funny now that after everything we've been through, he's probably the dog that I have had the strongest bond with out of all my dogs. So going back to him and I being the underdog, and leaning into the Rocky theme during the the chemotherapy, and the oncologist was right outside of Philly, the city where Rocky was born. I get a call from the Philadelphia Eagles, and again, heard the story, and they're like, how do you feel about getting honored on Sunday Night Football? And I was like, wow. I said, that's amazing. So November 16th, against the Lions, they brought us in. So I came down the day before, but there was one thing I had to do before the game. We had to run the Rocky steps in Philly, and we we went and did it, and that was, you can see on my Instagram, we have pictures in front of it, and that was so symbolic. But I tell you what was really cool about that, guys, is that I got there that day, and I was kind of annoyed that there were so many people already at the steps and everything. But then I kind of looked at it, and I took a step back, and I said, man, all these people are here fighting some type of demon, or having some redemption moment, and it just gave me a sense of pride. I mean, you had senior citizens, kids, probably fighting cancer or doing it for a family member, and you really saw that moment, and that symbolic of what those steps meant to a lot of people, and what they meant for Tambo and I. So we climbed the steps, and got pictures, and then we made our way down to the game, and they brought us out. First time out, first quarter, to a sellout crowd of about 70,000. And Philly fans, they're tough. If they don't like you, they're gonna let you know. So they
Santa Claus.
Yeah. So so they went over Tambo's bio, and they talked about all his injuries that he overcame, and all his accomplishments at work, and then they said, now he was given 2 weeks in July, and now he's fighting his biggest battle with an aggressive cancer. And as they said that, the whole stadium, gave us a standing ovation, which was amazing. It gave me, goosebumps. And on cue, when the camera panned to Tambo, he came to life and just started barking into the camera. And it wasn't aggressive. It was basically to say, I'm here. I'm still alive, and I didn't give up. And that was kind of like our full circle moment of having that defining moment in Philly. And and I got to give myself some credit, not to be narcissistic in any way, but I didn't give up on him. I trusted him. I believed in him. And what I've done throughout all of this is when he's faltered, or I felt like he's getting weak, I breathed life back into him when he needed it most. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that, when you work these dogs throughout your career, I always call them our security blankets, right? They're there for the handler through their darkest times, right? If you work a dog 7 or 8 years, people are going to go through divorces, losses of loved ones, and stuff like that. And those dogs are that silent present that are there by your side when other people may leave you, but they don't. So for 7 years, he gave everything he had to me to be there for me. So through all this with the cancer and everything, it was my time to believe in him and be there for him and provide that care for him and that motivation to him, while he was going through all that. And I firmly believe that's my positivity is also what's kept him going. And we just had another checkup at the oncologist yesterday, and they're miffed. They're like, they took him back. They did, imaging, another ultrasound, and they're like, there's no signs of cancer. This is a cancer, hemangiosarcoma, which is supposed to take dogs immediately. And he's still here. He's still living. He's still thriving. And we're about to go to Nashville in about a week and a half for Project K9 here's big event. There are performers for Paws to do a live appearance there. But he's thriving, guys. I mean, and this is a dog that just continues to defy the odds. And the great thing about it is he's inspired so many people along the way, which makes me incredibly proud to hear the stories and the inspiration, and how kind people have been, to reach out and share some of those stories of positivity of what he's done for others.
Yeah, and I tell you what, that is a truly remarkable story. I mean, both of y'all have come such a long way since July. That's pretty amazing. I think we got a bunch of questions lined up right now.
We do. We got three.
Got three?
Yes. First one. Come on now wants to know, what was Tambo's role during his years as a federal working dog?
Well, without, I can't go into too much detail about that, but, he was, explosive detection, K9. He was very good at, what he did, and he loved his job. And if, again, and I had two incredible dogs before that, but there's something to be said when you really click with this dog. And I would tell the handlers that all the time, is once that bond really clicks, you really get into sync with working that dog. And what I mean by that is, each other's behavior, when to step in, because you don't want to. These dogs know what they're doing, but it's a lot of time it's the handler that screws the dog up. So a lot of times you need to let these dogs work, but there's a time and place when the handler needs to step in, redirect them, guide them, detail things, and stuff like that. So Tambo and I just got in such an amazing thing where, we didn't really have to speak anymore. We knew each other's body language. I knew his change of behavior. I knew how to read him. And when you get to that point and you have that unspoken bond, I mean, it's such an amazing thing, and you really become an incredible team. But the biggest thing, especially for new handlers, is you have to be able to trust the dog, right? That's key. And it's funny because I went out this past year, and I was a judge at the World and Police Fire Games in Alabama for the K9 events. And we had a lot of handlers running. I was running the vehicles, and a lot of great teams from all over the world. But a lot of them started changing up the way they search because they got into a competition. And the dog, the minute you start changing up, the dog feeds off that energy, and they know, okay, mom or dad's not acting the same. And then the dog starts doing, goofy stuff, and it was causing the dog to fall sit and do all this other, cueing stuff and weird stuff. And, I remember talking to him afterwards. I was like, is that how you normally search? And they're like, no, I was nervous. And I was like, you just got to remember is that you got to trust the dog and go into that with the same mindset all the time. Because if you get called for any type of search, especially explosive detection, you have to have a clear mind. And I remember, early on, my mentors telling me is you got to kind of have whatever you're dealing with at home, you got to kind of have an imaginary trash can and leave those problems at home, because you got to be focused, because everything you do that is going down the end of that lead, and that dog is feeding off that, especially when you're really bonded with that dog. They feed off your energy. So if your mind isn't right, the dog's mind, isn't going to be right as well. So you really got to have that synergy and that bond, and have a kind of a clear mind when you're doing these searches.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. All right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Next up. Oh, what the hell did I just do? I blew the whole screen up. Slap him back wants to know, how did his cancer diagnosis change your perspective on service and retirement? Thank you for that question.
I tell you what it really did is for me to focus that and realize that nothing is forever, right? And sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day stuff of life, the stuff that doesn't matter. And I remember there's days where I'm rushing out the door, and he just wanted me to spend 5 minutes with him, and I'm rushing out to get to work, thinking, no, we're going to have plenty of time together to do this and that. And and tomorrow is never promised, right? So for one aspect, it enabled me to live in the present more and make sure I'm focusing on the things that matter, not being on my phone and all stuff like that. But the other part of that, when you get into retirement, is that also that the need for to having care set up for these dogs in retirement, plans in place. And one of the things that Jason is working with at Project K9 Hero is to get legislation passed through Congress, where they start providing care for these dogs once they retire. And that's something I'm pretty passionate about. I've gone down to the Capitol and lobbied with Jason plenty of times with Tambo to get this legislation passed, and we're continuing to work on that. And that's the other reason that I really started documenting the journey, just to kind of show that the battles these dogs deal with doesn't end when they retire, right? It continues. It's just a different fight.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And hopefully somebody listens to that. That's what needs to happen. Getting some of these here and getting her to listen and actually do it. Okay, next question. Fuck You Five wants to know, how did organizations like Project K9 Hero impact Tambo's fight?
They've been everything. Like I said, we're nearing now with the the TPLO surgery and the rehab from that, the emergency surgery with the initial cancer diagnosis, the chemotherapy, and the rehab that I continue to do with Tambo. We're at $30,000. And the biggest thing that they've given me is they've given me my dog back, right? They've given me time with him. And I tell Jason, with Project K9 here, is you can't put a price on that, is that I get more time with my dog. We had another dog on our unit that had lymphoma, and he wasn't going to live very long with it. But Project K9 Hero, they retired the dog at 3. They got the dog in the program, got it through treatment, and gave that dog another year of life with the family. And again, that's something the family wouldn't have been able to afford. And the biggest thing is they give you time with these dogs, where if they have a significant injury and a young handler can't afford this surgery, they give that dog his life back. They give him their mobility back. And one of the great things also about Project K9 here, for the there's dogs that go through PTSD, right? Just like humans do. And some of them have been through maybe the ones that go overseas, or have been through some other events that are maybe not adoptable. Jason has a sanctuary out in Tennessee where he brings these dogs in and he rehabs them with specialists to get them, adopted back out to, suitable families. So, they don't give up on these dogs. And I think it's just an amazing, program, that they have there. And if you go on their, they're on all social media platforms, but if you also go on their website, at projectk9here.org, you can see a lot of the story, not only Tambos, but dogs that have been shot in the line of duty, stabbed, hitting their cruiser, where Project K9 has stepped in and given them, life-saving surgery where that handler might not have been able to afford it, and really just stepped in. And one of the great things they do is when these dogs do eventually pass, they have an artist that does a portrait of the dog at the end and sends it to the handler and his family as kind of a parting gift to remember them by, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Appreciate
There you go.
I love them long wants to know, what lessons has Campbell taught you about resilience, faith, and never giving up?
He's taught. I mean, it's been everything, because I've been through a lot, recently, and I'll tell you one of the big things, and I don't mind sharing it through. Tambo brought me back with my dad. My dad left when I was an infant, and we had a broken relationship. And again, kind of me being that underdog, I grew up without a father. I kind of had to figure out how to become a man on my own, and I got some structure when I got into law enforcement, but we kind of had a strained relationship. And my dad was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and when we talked, it was always very distant. But what kind of brought us back together is he was relating his fight to Tambo's, right? And that kind of opened the segue of us having lines of communication and connecting. I knew he wanted to talk, because he would ask me how Tambo's doing, how's his chemotherapy, when am I getting a Tambo shirt. And it just really it brought us back together. And I was able to take my son out there, and he got to meet my son, and I got to see him with my son for the first time. And but little did I know that was probably going to be one of the last times, because I just came back from Florida, this past weekend, and my dad had some complications from the chemo, and they just put him in hospice. But I got to be honest, if it wasn't for Tambo, my dad and I wouldn't have probably came back together, and he wouldn't have got that time with my son, which I'm forever grateful for, of having that time with my dad. And he just taught me to have resilience in anything, and to continue to fight regardless of what the odds are, right? Because a lot of times things happen to us and say we're never going to come back from this, or this is a done deal, or or you lose your job, and I'm never going to find another job like this, or you go through a bad breakup and I'm never going to get through this. And he just enabled me to, regardless of the odds, of not giving up hope, and continuing to fight. And when you do that, each day things get better, right? And to live in the present, and to not focus too far ahead. So he's taught me so much, and he continues to to do that, every day of his existence. And one thing, I don't take time for granted anymore. When I come home, I put my phone away, and I try to focus on the things that are important, like spending time with my son, and not worrying about stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and spending time with family, that's where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
That is where it's at.
Absolutely.
I think we got one more question in here. Oh, hey.
Hi. And Bobby Walker wants to know, how about them Hoosiers, Lacey?
Hey, I tell you what, if anybody listening tonight is a Miami fan, I just got one question for them. Who's your daddy? That's all I got to say. And Elizabeth0916 wants to know, where in Tennessee is the Project K9 Hero located?
They're not too far. It's in, I think I want to say Whitehall, Tennessee, not too far out of Nashville. But he's got a big property there, and he's continuing to build on that. And one thing I'll say about that, we got this big charity event, coming up in at the Nashville Palace, and if people want to know what, they want to donate to a charity where they know their money's going to something, and sometimes you donate to these bigger charities and you wonder if it's actually going to the right things. Tambo and I are proof that that money goes directly to those dogs. As I said, we're about 30 grand in. Each chemotherapy session was $700, a session. Anything I need, they provide it, and they do it for all the dogs, in the program. So it's a top notch, organization, and they really do things the right way when it comes to our working dogs in the country.
Yeah, sounds like a great organization. I read up on them a little bit, and folks out there listening, if you want to be a part of that and you want to donate, just go to projectk9hero.org, and and they've got everything that you can do to donate to them, and they are doing a great thing. These working animals that have worked for police forces, when they retire, they start to get a little unhealthy. A lot of times, due to whatever, old age, and so they need a little bit of help. And I'm sure that your donations will be greatly appreciated.
Now, Chris, you had said that you've been working for 23, 24 years. What are your plans? Are you going to keep going? Are you going to be retiring soon? Almost 25.
Man, K9 is always going to be my passion, but what I've really, especially with Tambo inspiring me, what I've really gotten into is leadership, right? And I love leading people. I love mentoring people, and I get enjoyment out of seeing other people have success. And I think we need more good leaders, in this world. And I always said, I want people to follow me for the person I am, and never for a title that I have, right? And when you earn people's trust, and sometimes you have to maybe put something forward that's not as popular, people may not like it, but they'll do it because they believe in you, right? And that's the type of leader that I strive to do. And I get a lot of enjoyment of having a positive impact on others. So I'm going to continue down the leadership route, at least for a few more years. And then I got some projects that I'm working on outside with that that Tambo and I are involved in. I got 2 books coming out this year. I have Tambo's story coming out in a book that'll be published in the next couple of months, and that's kind of Tambo's full story with all the details of a little bit more about my background, and again how Tambo and I came together, our bonding process, retirement, and then the whole cancer shebang. And also it really dives in deep to my relationship with my father, which kind of ties into that, which I have Tambo to thank for that. So that's going to be a 2-book series. The first one will end after kind of the Eagles game, and my closing time with my dad, and then the next book will be a little more emotional, as that'll pick up from there and follow him through the rest of his life. And then on top of that, I have a children's book coming out, believe it or not. That will be out probably in February. And if you'd asked me, 6 months ago or 7 months ago me would be writing a children's book, I'd have laughed in your face. But this is what this dog has inspired me to do. But one of the things that really touched me was how he's impacted children. And I wrote this book. It's about Tambo, and it's about him getting sick and then getting better and then inspiring children, but in a way that they can understand. And it's for any child that has ever felt small, alone, unseen, or is going through some type of illness, and kind of how to get through that and not give up. And then it's kind of got a reference in the back for parents and teachers of how to kind of go over the book and what they what they learned from that. So I'm going to take the first probably 100 copies, and I'm going to donate that to Children's Cancer Hospital, along with some stuffed Tambo German Shepherds that I'm getting made. And because it's not about, for me, it's not really about making money. It's about having a positive impact. And the main reason I wrote Tambo's adult book is to kind of share that story, because there's a story in there for everybody. It's about resilience. It's about having hope. It's about finding light in the darkest of times, and to never give up. And so I think it's kind of got all the feels. And I think it's turned out amazing, and I can't wait to get it out and share it with everybody.
And where will we be able to find this book? So will it be Amazon or something?
I'll make sure I put the announcement out on my Instagram, which you can follow me on there at lowercase k, the number 9 underscore. You got it right up there, Tambo, Tambo. But my plan is to have it out in the bookstores. It'll be on Amazon, and I'm also going to be hopefully eventually launching my own website with stuff on there as well. So that'll be coming down the pike in the in the near future as well.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, we've got how to contact you. That's probably through Tambo's Instagram account. We've got that you're writing books. We've talked about Project K9 Hero. I got a question for you now.
Yes, sir.
It's a question in 3 parts.
All right.
I need to know, and Misfit Nation wants to know, because we're all about building good habits. Need to know 3 things that Chris has to do every day that are non-negotiable.
Well, the first is getting up and having a positive attitude of being thankful for having another day to share with family and make a positive impact. And if you think about it, every day you may have a bad day where you might have made some mistakes or it just didn't go your way. But the beautiful thing about life is the sun's going to go down and it's going to rise another day, and you have that next day to do a do-over, right, and make that impact.
Yes.
And to wake up every day and be able to have another day to live and make an impact. And one thing I try to strive to do every day is, whether it's a small thing, is just try to make somebody's day, right? And sometimes it's the little things, right? And as a leader, what I really learned is that as a leader, when you go in and you lead a large group of people, you're really setting the tone for their day, right? You can go in and you can be in a bad mood, and you may be all in your feelings and not say good morning to someone, but then that person thinks that you don't like them or you've impacted their day. So I try to go out of my way to acknowledge people and say something positive to them to build people up. And I think in a world that we live in, where for whatever reason, when people put themselves out there, and do things like put themselves on podcasts, there's so many people that try to tear them down, because they're not doing it right. Instead of having that hate, try to go out and support those people and acknowledge them and congratulate them for the things they're doing. Because sometimes it's not easy to put yourself out there, or to share a story, or to even sometimes express your feelings, especially when you look at the fields of law enforcement and military, right? And, you feel like you always have to have this type A alpha personality and be on point all the time, but that's just not reality. So it's okay sometimes to not be okay, but just be a good person. And I strive to try to get better, every day as a person, as a leader, and as a father. And that those are the, if you want the three things, so those are three things that I strive to get to be the best I can, every day when I get up, and that's what's important for me.
All right. All right. And you know what? That's a good 3 right there. I like that. Very good. Anything, Stephen?
Check us out on Reach Across America, Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Chris, I love the story. I keep looking at your picture with the chicken suit on. I almost captured the picture to make it my screensaver because he's so cute.
He's a good sport. He lets me put it on him now.
Hey, Misfit Nation, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Remember, we love you, we see you, and tomorrow will not be as great a day if you're not in it. So if you're feeling the darkness, reach out to someone. Call 988. If you're a veteran, hit option 1. They will get you the help they need. If you don't want to do that, contact us. We love you. We'll see you next time. And thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Selling your car shouldn't feel like a second job. It should feel easy. With Carvana, it is. Just visit Carvana.com, enter your license plate or VIN, answer a few quick questions, and get an offer in minutes. Like what you see? We'll pick it up right from your door and hand you your check. No haggling, no hassle, no problem. Car selling made easy on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.